Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Enlit Asia's interview series. Today we're discussing blockchain, something that has been much talked about over the last few years as being transformational in the way in which we complete transactions within the energy sector. I have the pleasure of being joined by two representatives from Siemens, Professor Dr. Monika Sturm, Principal Key Expert in Digitalization, and Maria Rossbander, Strategic Marketing, Innovation and Blockchain Expert. Together, we will dive a little deeper into the subject and discuss its advantages and disadvantages over how we currently do business, its true potential, and how it might be applied to the ASEAN power and electricity sector. Monika and Maria, hello, and thank you both very much for joining me.
Hi, Simon.
Thank you very much.
As I mentioned in the introduction to this discussion, blockchain-based distributed ledger technologies have been one of those things that has featured in discussions across the energy value chain for some time. It would be interesting, though, to touch on its beginnings. How did it all start, and can you give us a simple explanation of the technology?
Sure. Thank you for having the opportunity to have the talk with you, Simon. And let me start. Blockchain, and I personally prefer more the term DLT, is something which we are very much interested in. And I would like to give you a short and hopefully technical, easy explanation. So DLT for me is a robust term that refers to a distributed storage of data on a shared ledger, which enables the exchange of value or data between all the network participants. And the exchange of value will be done in a very trusted way. So to summarize it, it's a kind of new internet protocol which offers a controlled data exchange within the partners in the ecosystem. But Maria, maybe you can give us even a simpler example.
Yes, thank you. So what really made the difference for me was the example that was introduced with the mirror. So it's the mirror example. So imagine yourself, you're looking into a mirror, so you get this one information, so that is the picture of yourself. But then now imagine that mirror would scatter into 1,000 pieces. And still every piece of that mirror contains the same information. So that is the picture of me. So you have this decentralized, trusted information that is scattered throughout all the different pieces. So that really helped me understand what blockchain or DLT actually is.
Yes.
Thank you, Maria. Great example. So the history of blockchain. So the blockchain really incorporates three branches of mathematics. It's cryptography, distributed system, and game theory. So all these technologies started already 40 years ago. Let me summarize some of the main development steps. I would like to mention the first one, 1979 by Merkle, the Merkle tree research. Then the next one, which I really think of, it's very important. It was 1982 by Leslie Lamport, the Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus algorithm. He really described the Byzantine general problem in a very nice way. A next milestone, I would name 1997, the smart contracts by Nick Szabo. And something which I think is very famous already was the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, the Bitcoin white paper 2008. Mm-hmm. I think these were the ground technologies for blockchain. And looking in the looking what has happened in the past years, 2013, I would really like to mention the white paper from Ethereum, which really opens a complete new way of making use of this technology. Having said that, I would say blockchain. The first version was mainly around cryptocurrency. Some colleagues describe it as blockchain 0.1. Then blockchain 0.2 was the area where we were able to really make use of the smart contracts to enable autonomous interaction between, for example, devices. And I believe we are now in the blockchain 0.3, where really the decentralized application started, and some people are already talking about blockchain 0.4, where we really now industrialize this new technology.
Sure. I mean, on that note, some of the positives of blockchain have been lauded for some time. Can you perhaps remind us of some of the ways in which blockchain has advantages over existing ways of doing business? But it would also be interesting to understand what it's not so good for. What are the disadvantages?
Sure. So advantages, I think one major point, which is quite clear, is that there is no central control. Yeah? And there is, what it really offers is this single truth and in the shared ledger between all the parties. So really you can get a kind of cross-party process and data integrity. It's for me a kind of basis for any trusted automation. So whenever we go in this automated systems area, we need something like blockchain. To summarize, it's secure, it's immutable, it's transparent. But what I really want to mention is that it's also the basis of new business models. We have to change the business models, and I think this is really a key topic, which we haven't thought about that in the beginning, but where we now put a lot of effort on it. But for sure, there are also some disadvantages. Just to mention some technical challenges we still have to manage. These are the scaling, performance topics, but also the interoperability. Mm-hmm. And there are not only technical challenges, there are also social challenges, like still a lack of technology understanding. Many people and many managers are still skeptical of that new technology. And also, we don't really have set regulatory topics, still missing standards. So this is where I see still some challenges. And to close this question, I would also mention some business and market challenges, like market adoption, lack of qualified capital. We don't have all the people really being able to implement that new technology. And the cost benefit. First, we have to invest before the technology is really running. So these are a couple of challenges we have to master. But I currently see that these new types of collaboration will help to change it, to make this technology really come through and to really release all the potential which this technology has.
Okay, so these disadvantages, do they explain why it seems to have been so slow in its uptake? I mean, like I said, it has been much discussed for some time. Certainly, I've been involved in discussions about blockchain for 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years now. What's needed to speed it up? What's needed to speed up acceptance of the technology globally?
I think it's quite clear. So we have to manage the technical challenges. So I think universities, research institutes, companies, startups are really working on that. Yeah. So I think there are really good solutions coming up. We also have to manage these skepticism. We have to show that the technology really shows the quality and shows the ability to leverage the advantages. But what I've seen in the last years, that many companies started to build their own blockchain solution. But blockchain really brings the benefit in working in ecosystem, in working together in ecosystems. So I think if we manage to define how to work together, how the new governance models of such foundations, for example, would work in the future, this is, I believe, something which will give a push to the technology. And we have already seen this in the more financial area and in the logistic area, where we really can see the technology working. I think this is a good example, and I think taking these examples and bring this into the energy market would really help.
Okay. Okay. Are there any examples of use cases or use cases in the energy industry, particularly in power and electricity sectors?
Yes, we've actually identified quite a few, and today I would like to give you two examples. So one is called Connect to Evolve, and the other one is automated pay-per-use. So Connect to Evolve, that's a new financing method, which also allows different way of project investment via crowd investment mechanism. In this case, it's really based on donations, whereas automated pay-per-use is responding to a trend where we see customers would like to shift, go away from the heavy CapEx investment and rather go to the OpEx investment. So, but let me start with the Connect to Evolve project, which is also in response to another trend that we've seen, and we always thought, okay, we got the there are solutions out there specifically in electricity and power, but how can we access that? So, for example, in Africa, we have 600 million people that don't have access to energy. I think globally we're talking about 1 billion. And energy is it's always the fundamentals to really for development. But but you need money for development or for that electricity. So we were thinking, how can we contribute that? How can that change? So in our case, we're testing that with crowd investment mechanism and a smart contract. So that's the blockchain part of it, is tracking all the different investment where we're looking for donations to send a solar container to a small village in Senegal. So currently they don't have any access to electricity or very unstable or even using expensive alternatives or quote unquote dirty expensive alternatives like diesel generators. And in this case, it would power 3,000 people that would be connected to a small mini grid solution and also their storage included. And we're looking for investments or donation in this case, where you can crowd invest into to make that project happen. So we're not looking for this one person anymore. We're really looking for all different kind of investors with different, let's say, motivations in order to invest or to donate. So you can also start very small, 10 euros, for example. So where can you invest in a small amount, like very in this fraction? This is also where blockchain can really support because we're taking out a lot of the transactions costs or potentially can take them out. And with only 150 euros, you can already power one person. And then coming back, and this is the investors. So you can literally develop a new customer type because there we have three different, or we have segmented those in three different customers. So one are the power consumers. So imagine you would be living where the solar Athena or that energy infrastructure project is going to be built. Wouldn't you like to invest and then get, for example, electricity cheaper in return? That could be one option. We can go for the people or organizations that are looking into developing specific areas. That could be NGOs, but also diasporas or expats. So you, for example, in this case, you've been born in Senegal, but you live somewhere else and you have an interest to develop that. So why wouldn't you invest into an energy infrastructure to give back to your country to help develop? And then lastly, and this is also in response to a trend that we see, is the pure investors. So the segment number 3. So people like you and me. In some countries, we already see there's a negative interest rate. So if you want to save money, you're actually paying the bank so you can keep the money, but it's smaller. So the motivation to invest your personal money is also higher. So why wouldn't you go for an energy infrastructure so you have an impact, you do something good, and potentially you get interest rate in return? So that wouldn't work for the donation, but that's the principle. That's what we're envision, a new kind of business model. So that's the financing idea. The automated pay-per-use, which is in response to the shift from CapEx to OpEx, that is another trend we have observed, and we would like to enable our customers to calculate a different business case. Usually business cases are very heavy or hard justified because of the CapEx investment. And what if we, for example, can offer your product and all you have to ensure that you're paying for the installation? You're not really paying for the whole product, but you will pay once you use it. That's why we call it automated pay-per-use. And the blockchain in this case is again a smart contract who's automating. So there's events that are being triggered, and that event is going to be put on that smart contract, or we know that information, and then it will be also the payment will be automated. So there's a lot, of course, algorithms and coding in the background, but the main purpose is that you can now buy products without paying the full amount. You will only pay a fee based upon the usage, and then we're sharing the risks with the customer. But we also share the revenue, because you're making revenue when you're using that equipment or software, for example, and with that revenue you can actually pay the usage. So those are two examples that we see make a lot of sense in the energy and electricity sector.
Are there any changes in the way companies will cooperate in the future as a result of blockchain technologies?
Absolutely. So, what do we see currently? Currently, we see that the big tech companies really create walled gardens. I'm talking about these centralized platforms, and everybody understands that there is a big benefit in having these centralized platforms where one partner is owning the control of the whole ecosystem. We often hear something like the winner takes it all. So, and there is currently this big attitude: how can we change it? Are there any new approaches to decentralize the platform monopolies and to create common owned platforms? And we are using for this approach the term co-petition, where in an ecosystem we work in a collaborative way together to design the IT infrastructure, to design the network, and to design the governance, and also work in a collaborative way with our partners to define how we can access the data on that in that network and how we can make use of this data. And if we have this type of collaboration, within an ecosystem done with our partners, we would then open a layer where every partner could offer and build its own service on top of it. But this layer would be in competition. So this is why we call it co-petition. There is an area where we cooperate in order to enable co-petition on the top of it. And we currently see that this is really something which is very well taken. And I really believe that this is the approach to make the technology more feasible for many players and for many users in the market.
Okay. Looking specifically then at the region in which I am now, Southeast Asia, distributed energy is set to play a significant role in the region. How can blockchain and peer-to-peer trading unlock the opportunities that exist here? What viable solutions exist and that we might see implemented?
Yeah, so, and here I would also like to refer what we see in the market to give an example. So first of all, of course, peer-to-peer energy, that always includes conversation with the regulator. So you can't just do that. It takes, you need to have this ecosystem approach also. And it usually is about green energy. For example, you have solar energy on your roof and you would like to not only consume, but you would also like to sell it. So, and that takes flexible tariffs, and that's where the regulator comes in. And we've seen examples. So that could be, for example, for Indonesia, very a good idea. And what we see the example, and that's actually also what Monika shared with me yesterday. So please, Monika, add when I missed something from the conversation we had. But I really like that idea. What they do in Mexico is they have industry parks, and there they have very the power stability is very moderate. So in order to avoid blackouts, they put up solar panels on their rooftops. But that sometimes then also leads to oversupply. So they have more energy than they can actually consume. And this is where they would like to bring in or they would like to share that or sell it to the population in Mexico. So they're already doing their own business model, have a new revenue stream, but they need to participate in the market, which again takes the regulator approach. And that is and so they're currently negotiating with them in order to make that possible. So that could also be an option, for example, for Indonesia, where you have all these scattered islands and not can go with one single solution. But Monika, maybe did I miss anything, or would you like to add something to this example?
No, wonderful, nicely explained. And we have already started with this peer-to-peer energy trading use case a couple of years ago. Our first project was in Brooklyn, in New York. But there we really saw that there were a lot of open regulatory issues. And this is why I said it's really hard to implement it if the regulator does not fulfill the needs which we have from the energy market. And this is something we are currently in discussion with them. And we see that there is now an open mind. And I believe that these use cases will come soon.
Great. Okay. So where else do you see opportunities for blockchain in this region? How do you see these further in the case of blockchain technologies adoption by the sector? And where do you see the biggest impact of the technology? For example, how will it make a difference to key players in the market currently, like the utilities and consumers?
Yeah, so here I would like to refer to 4 different ways of new business models and how this can have an impact. And number 1 is the traceability and transparency, where you have opportunities in order to use blockchain. Number 2 is the market decentralization, which is obviously very favorable for the Asian region. Then we have IoT and smart devices and finance and payments. But what does it actually mean? So for traceability and transparency, for example, what we find very interesting is the origin certification. So there you can track but also prove that you have green energy, again with the example of the solar panel. So what if you can, usually people will pay a premium, at least that's something we see, you would pay a premium in order to have access to green energy. And then on the other side, you can bring in the token model or say that because of the carbon dioxide you have saved, you can offset like carbon certificates, or you can bring in the ETS, the so-called emission trading system, which then goes to the market decentralization, because that brings you to a wholesale market. So all of a sudden you'll be able to trade those certificates, but also around the world, not only in your region, and that again opens up new revenue streams. If you connect that, for example, with energy storage or batteries, which can also be in the region very beneficial, you can then program the smart contracts, and they feed energy into the grid, for example, for grid stability reasons. So you can automate those processes, for example, also again with the blockchain, or for EV charging, you can make it very transparent for the cars that are charging. Do they really charge green energy? Because that's what the electric vehicle is all about. And again, you can go into those trading mechanisms, and you have all this information for transparency. And lastly, for the finance and payments, this is what we touched upon already, is the smart contract payment, for example, with the payment automation, in our example, automated pay-per-use, or with the Connect to Evolve, where we're looking for new kind of investments, so crowd investment or crowd donators. So these are all the different options that you have, and many more. I just wanted to give you a few examples.
Sure. So some real opportunities for blockchain in the region. My next question is moving away from this slightly. Blockchain and many of the next gen technologies that we're seeing at the moment are being driven by startups. We've seen a lot of those who participated in our own Initiate program. The fairly limited energy startup scene here in Southeast Asia has been hit by the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, with some sources of financing drying up. How's the startup scene in Europe holding up, and do you see it impacting necessary developments in this space?
Yeah, so I think we need to also look at this question in also a different angle, because the energy startups, I think globally, they're not responding to the current problem, and that is COVID-19, right? So that is a startup is not, or any innovation, it's not only always about investment, it's also about timing. So maybe the timing giving really the struggle of, or the global struggle of a pandemic is catering to their problems as well. So it might not only be the investments. Whereas on the other side, and this is what we see in Europe, there has been clearly a dip in March, but that is picking up again. So investments are being done again. However, startups tend to, only be surviving for a couple of months. So hopefully they have survived. Mm-hmm. Or what we also see, to this point earlier, some really pivot their business model because they see the offerings they're bringing right now, it's not catering to the needs. And they just simply change the idea.
Okay. As we just discussed then, blockchain and a large amount of the tech disrupting global energy systems in recent times has been in the realm of startups. Siemens, though, is most definitely not a startup. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing in this space? Do you have a blockchain solution yourselves?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we've been very engaged, specifically Monika. I mean, we do a lot in that space, and just to the point of startups. Of course, Siemens clearly is not a startup, right? We're very big, or Siemens Energy, to be more precise. Mm-hmm. But it is a very important tool for us, and if that only means to adapt also the qualities of the startup, right? Working like a startup, being more agile. So we're trying to copy paste, of course, also the good things of a startup, because sure. Per se we are slower. However, and that's also the reason, because we tend to be slow, that's why we love to work with startups, because we can learn a lot from them. They have the great ideas, they have the pace, they work in their own environment, so that's where we clearly profit and benefit from there. And together with them, we can then develop new digital offerings or also services to stabilize the customer's profitability, which is very important to us, of course, because we want to make sure, or we actually dedicate ourselves that we can prepare and support the customers or our customers with regards to the challenges of the future. And there will be always challenges. And this is why it's so important for us to work with startups to have the speed, but also to learn from them.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. Well, look, Maria, Monika, that brings me to the end of my questions. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you both very, very much for joining us. It was some really interesting insights, probably one of the nicest introductions to blockchain that I've heard. Maria, that example of the mirrors was definitely made it a lot clearer for me. So look, guys, thank you very, very much for taking the time to join us. I'm really, really very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.